This is the ATI Podcast.
All right, we are live for the ATI Podcast, episode 40, and no better way to do episode 40, a momentous episode, than our CULTS, Conspiracies and Killers series. This is going to be the fourth edition in that, and we're going to do it on Pazuzu Algarad. And so welcome back, everybody, to the ATI Podcast. Familiar voices on this, for sure. We got old Ridge Jackson from Waxing On RJ with us. Now 3 episodes deep over there on Waxing On.
Yeah, and we got a new episode in the works. We might get to it this weekend, but got Halloween parties and all this stuff going on. So
right.
We'll say not the next weekend. We got some pretty hot picks.
Hell yeah.
Coming up for this new one.
I was browsing YouTube and I did see those are some of our most viewed videos, or the waxing videos. So yeah. Good job, boys. Good job.
Yeah, getting a lot of reshares too from bands as well.
Yeah.
Miradad just had some activity there from them in particular. We've had Relapse Records, City Caterpillar, various people like or retweet what we've been putting out. So It's been helpful for sure getting the word out.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, we got Josh here as usual.
Hey.
Joshua.
Hey.
Hey. As you've heard, and myself, yours truly, Mr. Bear. And we're here today to talk about Pazuzu Algarad. So Pazuzu may be one of the more fascinating people that we've recovered on this series, I think, just because I think he kind of crosses multiple boundaries. Pazuzu is a guy who not only obviously a killer, if anybody knows anything about him, but he almost had a cult-like following.
Right. I would how would this is maybe a bad comparison, but would you go along the lines of saying maybe like the Manson family kind of situation going on?
Not a far off comparison in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's certainly some similar themes which we'll get into today, but things like orgies and sex parties and multiple partners and those sorts of themes and
sex to murder tapes.
Yeah, but like he tried to talk everybody into having orgies and stuff like that, but nobody ever wanted to. So I don't think he would have that Manson type.
Right. I get what you're saying. Although he did have multiple fiancés, which I'm sure we'll get into that. So
Right.
He had some kind of allure over women somehow.
Pazuzu, he's really an amalgamation of kind of that cult fascination that we have with this series, certainly the killers aspect, but also really kind of dabbles in the conspiracy end of things in some respects, because you're going to see here today in some of the information that we cover and how we talk about Pazuzu, because he is just riddled with lore.
Definitely.
Most of what took place in a small town, and a lot of people embellished things, put their own spins on things, kind of this typical small town chatter where a minnow becomes a bass, that becomes a shark, that becomes a whale, if you will, as stories change hands and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of lore and hype around him in particular, and we'll get into some of that, but let's start out this discussion like we normally do. Let's talk about how we first heard of Pazuzu. So I'll start things off. I was totally completely unaware of him and what he did until I stumbled upon his documentary on Vice, which we'll talk a little bit more so about today, and then they had some subsequent follow-up reports on him as well. But yeah, the documentary that they had on Vice with him in particular is how I came to know who he was, and was pretty fascinated because, you look at him, he's a character. If you just look at Pazuzu, he obviously aesthetically, at least what he became famous for, a very wild look to him, had dreadlocks, poor hygiene, tattoos all over him, would wear turbans sometimes.
Yeah, and he started doing that like after 9/11 for more shock.
Yeah. Some of the documentaries I was watching, like he tried to morph himself into anything that the populace feared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was more of a counterculture type.
Right.
He just wanted to be not necessarily respected, but feared,
recognized
in that way.
Yeah,
kind of that dynamic. What's the first time that you had heard of Pazuzu, Josh?
I want to say maybe the Vice stuff too. And then, like I said, me and you were talking before streaming. I think I remember hearing something about him because of the Exorcist movie, because that's the demon that is claimed to possess the little girl in the Exorcist movie is Pazuzu. And I think that came up in a discussion or video or something. And then, it went from there.
That's definitely where you got the first name Pazuzu. And then, which we'll get into some of that. The rest of his name, too, is from demonic and Arabic lore. Right. Ridge, how about you? What's the first you heard of Pazuzu?
I never knew anything about this crazy dude at all until you told me about him.
Yeah.
And now you've went down the rabbit hole.
Down the rabbit hole of this horrible monster.
He's a character for sure. No questions asked. We're just going to get into the early bio. Now, I will say there is a lot of conflicting reports out there about Pazuzu, his upbringing, his backstory. There is very little about his early bio, but I was able to scavenge up enough to talk about, help build that character profile, talk about some of the psychology, how we ended up there, that sort of thing. That's going to make a little bit more sense, I think, at least in my opinion. So we're just going to get right into it. So Pazuzu Algarad was born John Alexander Lawson on August 12th, 1978 in Danville, Illinois. Was born into what was most would consider a normal family, mother or father in America, and in San Francisco, California is kind of where they had their homestead set up. His parents were Timothy J. and Cynthia Lawson, and they were actually married in 1971, so quite a few years before old John Alexander Lawson, who would later become known as Pazuzu, was born. So not many details are really out there about his early life, but what is known that his parents separated in 1990, and after that, they relocated to North Carolina. Pazuzu spent most of his life with his mother at their residence near Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Eventually, at some point, John Alexander Lawson does change his name to Pazuzu, so this might get a little confusing. So from here on out, kind of with the Sharikio episode, similar to that situation, I'm just going to continue to recognize him as Pazuzu. So when Pazuzu was a teenager, he did suffer from 2 mental illnesses that they definitively knew that he had, which was right. Agoraphobia as well as schizophrenia specifically. His mother did try her best, allegedly, to get him treatment and even consulted a psychiatrist. However, she could not afford much. His mental condition deteriorated very quickly, and these 2 illnesses had a long-lasting impact on Pazuzu as a child.
And, watching documentaries and listen to her speak, even about him growing up and stuff, I feel like she herself was probably very mentally ill and was at the mercy of his schizophrenia in his episodes too. And there's like you said, there's not a lot of information about that, you know what I mean, on the web.
Right.
But yeah, if you look into any of the stuff about his family and his mother, she is most certainly mentally ill herself.
Yeah, she's at the very least, she's an enabler.
Right.
His mother said in an interview during The Devil You Know, so The Devil You Know is the famous Vice documentary on Pazuzu, which is a 5-part documentary, I believe. It's out there. You can watch it. Easily accessible. Most of it's actually even on YouTube. So her direct quote was, "He wasn't by any means an angel, but he wasn't a bad person or boogeyman or whatever phrases people have to call him." If that doesn't sound like a absent parrot statement I've ever heard one. Pazuzu started consuming alcohol as well as many different drugs at the age of 13. Now, it's important to also put into perspective that Pazuzu grew up in North Carolina, right in the heart and the takeoff of the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
Right.
And right there in the Bible Belt, as we all know, being in the Bible Belt ourselves, that those were some of the areas that were hit most impactfully. Low-income housing, opioids being thrown at people and their problems just to get people out of doctors' offices, and doctors also getting kickbacks and incentives and so on and so forth. Maybe one day we'll have a conversation about opioids in particular, but just to kind of paraphrase it lightly and kind of put, what the psychology and the psychiatry was going on at the time during that area, kind of the sociology even of the people in that area.
Yeah.
You have to understand that everybody is pilled up largely, and it's low income housing in that area.
Right.
And that front is being met with very biblical and evangelical romanticism that's going on in that area as well. So extreme religious fanaticism too.
Right.
It's kind of the perfect storm, which, anybody here in Southeast Missouri, very similar
rebellion
things going on.
Backlash.
Pazuzu, in his situation, of course, as we're going to detail in his profile, his personality profile, he was innately just trying to rebel against this. So at 13, he's trying all kinds of different drugs. He's already doing alcohol. He grew up and really became addicted to these things as a teenager, and they became a part of his daily routine. He really started to get violent and began to harm animals around him as well. And that's where things started to, I'll say, the beginning of the spiral in many respects. You could draw it back to the drug use and that sort of stuff. You could draw it back to the mental illness, but this is where he started to, quite frankly, start to do things of a criminal nature.
Right.
Pazuzu legally changed his name in 2002, so we're jumping ahead here a little bit, a few years, to conform with his Satanist beliefs. His surname, ATI Algarad, which means Lord of the Locust in Arabic, and was first inspired his name by the demon from Exorcist, so that's where we get the first name.
Right, yeah.
In Arabic, that translates to English the Assyrian king of demons, so that's Pazuzu.
Yeah, so like if you want a little Jewish Christian, Orthodox Christian background on that, so Pazuzu was the leader of the jinn who were, I think it was King David who had a ring that commanded them to build great monuments and stuff like that. So yeah, Pazuzu comes from Arabic backgrounds, but he's also, he's in other religions too. So
right, it's all there in kind of the bed of Mesopotamia and all of that.
It all kind of shares common things.
A lot of stories, lore, and things overlap, whether it's Christianity. Yeah. Hey, here's some news. We talked about it on previous episodes. A lot of people think there's a huge difference between Christianity, Judaism, and Islamic beliefs.
And it all stems.
And there is a breaking point at some point, but the basis of their beliefs are largely all the same. The foundation.
Right.
They all kind of start in the same time period, the same location, all of that. So, and a lot of people don't realize that, especially in these small areas like this.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Pazuzu was heavily tattooed. We kind of mentioned that in the open. He started tattooing satanic imagery on himself. He literally had Satan on his forearm, identified himself as Satan on many occasions. 666, swastikas on his face, pentagrams, just anything, everything, absurd statements, things of that ilk all over himself. He would even graffiti his own home and property, just to incite people in his neighborhood and upset them. He actually filed down his teeth into spikes using a Dremel tool while high on meth.
Damn.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. To top this off, with his new appearance and persona, Pazuzu split his tongue to make it forked like a serpent.
And then he would also, I believe, he didn't bathe. He didn't believe in bathing. He wanted to be as filthy as possible.
Right.
To make, I guess he said it would bring him like supreme power.
Yeah. He romanticized filth.
Yeah.
That was his calling card for sure. As one could imagine, these drastically altered states of his appearance and the nature of the Deep South, again, we mentioned it, heavily conservative, evangelical, that Pazuzu and his friends were not very well received or liked in the communities of Winston-Salem.
And what's that do? That stokes the fire.
It's important to recognize as well that Pazuzu did have a following. People were drawn to him. Lawlessness of his house, his property, people were attracted to it. A lot of crazy stuff would happen there. We're going to detail some of that a little bit more so, but like he had followers. Kids were into him because of the rampant drug use. People would just go over there to do drugs, wild sex parties, stuff like that. People were attracted to that aspect of things. People were attracted to, hey, if we're going to get away with having a fight here in town, let's go to Pazuzu's because, everything's game there.
Yeah. Ain't nobody going to fuck with us over there.
Exactly. Pazuzu also became known in his neighborhood and his friends by all the debauchery that routinely took place on his property. In his house. So he would commonly let everybody know that he adopted the libertine lifestyle. A libertine is someone who lives life unencumbered by morals. Although it can be used in a neutral sense. Often if someone calls you a libertine, they just disapprove your lack of morality individually. Specific claims about Algarad's alleged behaviors included cutting himself and his buddies doing the same. They would just sit around and cut on themselves. Drink the blood of birds. They do copious amount of drugs. They'd perform rituals and sacrifices of rabbits in particular. They would stage nude orgies. They would let people just do whatever they want as they pleased in his abode, as we kind of alluded to earlier.
Yeah, there was one girl that I was watching that they asked, and they're like, yeah, he just pulled out a knife and cut the rabbit's throat and then started digging his hand in the body and rubbing it all over his body because he said the blood gave him the supreme power of Satan or something crazy like that. Comes like, can you imagine just sitting in this dude's living room? He whips out a fucking knife and just cuts this rabbit's throat and just starts rubbing it all over himself. Like, what would you do? You'd be like, what the fuck is going on?
And you're probably like too screwed up to go anywhere, so you're just like, all right, here I am for the night.
Left out of your head, for sure.
And this is the same motherfucker who doesn't bathe, mind you, so who knows how long that shit's on him.
Ugh.
Also, another thing that started to happen was started to collect copious amounts of dogs in his house too. The dogs would shit and piss everywhere. Nobody had ever cleaned it up. Nobody cared. That was a very unsettling thing as well. You know, it was said that as soon as you could walk into his house, you could smell urea, horrifically bad, and ammonia. Not only were the dogs shitting and pissing everywhere and them not being cleaned up, you were actually allowed to ask his friend to shit and piss in the house. There was many accounts of Pazuzu himself, when guests were over, just going to a corner and pissing in the corner.
God.
Yeah, and it would just stay there.
Yeah.
Like, they would not clean up the shit at all. And, like, the only way it would get removed is, like, maybe if, like, the dogs ate it or something.
Yeah. His house, he never cleaned, did anything. He has a dishwasher in his house, mind you. But the dishwasher is loaded with weapons.
Yeah.
Various weapons inside the dishwasher. Furthermore, the sink lavatories in the kitchen, the plumbing wasn't hooked up. They had buckets. There's a pretty famous video out there that was conducted by the sheriff's department, and it's a 9.5 minute walkthrough that you can see online. You can see it anywhere.
Brutal.
Where they detail a lot of what we're talking about here, the condition of the house, how rough this house is. Like, it's literally hell on earth.
Yeah.
The only accurate part of him calling himself Satan is he literally did create hell on earth. There's no question about it. Another big thing that it was constantly complained about Pazuzu and the property was he was constantly blasting black metal.
Okay, well,
all hours of the day.
I'm going to have to level with him on this one and be like, okay, I get it, yeah.
Not such a bad guy. That just kind of wiped it all out, huh? Here's the kicker. Pazuzu had a room dedicated to sacrificing animals.
The sacrifice.
And it was, not only was it found whenever they came to the house and ultimately he was apprehended, but it was known and documented in court documents predating that, based on other offenses that they'd come to the house for.
Right.
That it was recorded that he had a sacrifice room.
Yeah.
So the police knew about this for some amount of time, that he was torturing animals, and did nothing about it.
Whenever you're talking about that 9-minute video, when they're walking through that, they get to that room and they're like, "Oh, we got to get some guys with some air packs in here," because they couldn't breathe even with masks on.
Yeah, you can't literally go into properties like that without. Actually, unsettling to detail too much, but I actually encountered, as a property manager, a very similar situation.
Was it like a hoarder?
You could say that. That's a very
just really
light way of putting it. Well, not to get too much on the sidebar here, but
right, yeah. I'm interested now, though.
Okay, so the situation was that a couple, I won't name names, it's because it's an ongoing legal situation.
Right.
Is a couple lost a home, their property, in a fire. They rented 2 apartments from me. Now, mind you, we were trying to help people out in the community. They had a child, which is against policy because it's a senior living estate.
Right.
And everybody in the community banded together, made donations to them in the apartment community, I'm talking about, and approved and allowed these people to move in because we were helping out this needy family.
Right.
Insurance companies paying for everything, put down a deposit, did this, did that. Well, they would eventually pay us back because we started to get horrific smells throughout the building.
Oh.
And it wasn't making any sense. We'd been in every empty apartment. We were thinking drain traps are drying out because it was almost a sewer type smell.
Right.
And smells that we had encountered before, but not at that intensity. So then we started working our way back, and then apartments adjacent to there started getting drain flies really bad.
Ooh.
Then I started getting reports of them bringing animals into the apartment. Now, this woman, mind you, the whole time, she was a younger woman from the Caledonia area, tried to act like she was some second coming of Christ, in the sense that she was a huge animal advocate and would take in animals that were at risk or whatever the case was and shelter them and find places for them, da-da-da-da.
Well, that's fine, but newsflash, lady, you don't own that property.
Exactly right. I was getting various reports of animals inside that apartment, so the head count of animals was starting to get to be more than what was on the lease, too. So things started getting more increasingly suspicious. And then I got this weird text from her at some point, and this is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, is that she claimed that she dropped a fish tank in the hallway, and the fish water is what was causing the smell down there.
She got that straight from Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah. Sounds like a Dahmer thing.
What a bitch.
So I was like, something's not quite right here. So I kind of gave a reason. I was like, okay, we're doing an inspection. This is an inspection notice for all apartments. We're going to go into apartments. We're going to survey, make sure there's not anything infracting any of our policies, that sort of thing. Right. Life safety check. Yeah. Make sure your smoke detectors are working, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. Try to make it in the tenant's interest. Well, we go to her apartment, and things were picked up in a nature that was passable. However, she wouldn't let anybody go into the bedroom, claiming that her husband was in there sleeping and he was a trucker, he was off the road, da-da-da-da-da. Well, I guess she contained whatever mess into that room eventually. We circle back around and things die down for a couple of weeks, and then it comes back like threefold, like these smells and everything else. So then I have to come up with another thing. So then I contact pest control to start treating these drain flies, and we go into her apartment, and she wasn't answering me. She kept asking me if she could delay the inspection, yada, yada. I knock on the door, announce myself. I said, no, we cannot be, you've had plenty of notice, da-da-da-da-da.
Right, yeah.
I was like, we're coming in. And she's like, okay. So, and I knocked at the door, didn't answer. So I announced myself. I said, we're coming in, and opened the door. She's sitting on a couch. Now, mind you, we provided a furnished apartment. Mm-hmm. All utilities included, everything. Tons of donated stuff to these folks. I could not walk through that apartment without stepping on something, number one. There was stuff all over the floor, 950 square foot apartment. Mm-hmm. There was copious amounts, as soon as I came in, of incense burning on the counter. I'd say about 26 of incense. There was fragrance things in every single outlet. There was like potpourri and shit spread throughout the place, just like straight up poured into the carpet. Oh my God. There was as soon as I got inside the door, I was taken back by about a 4-foot long tote that was clear with a lid on it, and it was filled with raw meat. Ooh. Room temperature. Ooh. Inside that tote in and of itself.
What the fuck, dude?
I look over the counter. I'm just right inside this door. I look over the counter. I see something that looks like a pile of blood in a tile floor with a curtain draped over it.
Oh, God. Your own house.
I put my arm out and I said, what is this? She didn't answer me. She's sitting on a couch. All the cushions are off the couch. The cushions on the floor. And me just standing there, I counted a dog, a cat. I saw a snake cage. I saw a bird cage. Holy At a distance, I saw a fish tank. So she had already had all these animals in here that I wasn't aware of.
Right.
And I'm just going to try and excel this story along because there's a lot of details. I could take up a whole podcast just telling this.
Right.
But there was copious amounts of trash, food, animal feces, animal urine in the carpet. Place had never been cleaned, or looked like it had never been cleaned. I mean, she cleaned it up enough at some period to pass one inspection. Yeah. The bedroom was so stockpiled with trash, I couldn't get the bedroom door open.
Oh my!
But it was up to my eyes, and I'm 6'1".
Good night, man.
Jeez, she just threw everything in that room.
I knew that there was a dead animal on the floor that was covered up. I went over there, picked up the tarp, had gloves on. Sure enough, there's a dead dog on the floor.
Oh my God.
The dog was decaying already in the floor.
Holy shit.
Everything that I read about this Pazuzu guy, it takes me right back to that.
Oh, I
because
bet.
that's exactly, there was shit everywhere.
And did she have children, you said?
She had a child, yeah.
Damn, man.
She had a child. She had what looked to me to be 2 meth heads sitting next to her on the couch, ladies. Mm. And I said, I have to call the police, animal control, to just even get a start on this. And she's like, I understand. And she stands, and while I'm on the phone with them, she slides open the back glass door and just takes off. Disappears.
Never seen her again, did you?
So I get animal control there, and we find that. There's a cat that's emaciated that's like, she calls the city inspector out. He's like, I got to condemn this. And I'm like, I understand that. I just need you to tell me where we need to go from here.
That's brutal.
They gave me some references, but because they're government officials, they can't tell you specifically who to hire to do what. But they kind of like, well, I'd look up something like this. Oh, I did. But guess what was happening? Guess what was happening at this time? This was the same time that all that bad snow, freezing temperatures, lines
People's
busting.
Fucking pipes freezing up.
So everything was backed up 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah,
when I was calling around. I called Environmental Restoration, I called ServPro, I called CRS, I called all kinds of companies. Damn. We ended up having to deal with it. So then we start processing all the shit that's in here. So I just bought dumpsters from Lowe's, and me and maintenance guys put on hazmat suits and just shoveled stuff out with snow shovels into those dumpsters and took them to the dump directly.
Should ask your boss for hazard pay.
As we were pulling them out, we found more dead animals.
Oh my God.
There was dogs zip tied in cages, puppies.
Oh, dude. See, that's just fucked, dude. Somebody should have went to jail for that.
When you watch these videos of Pazuzu's house, I'm telling you, it's literally what I experienced in person.
Yeah, that's sick.
It was just piles of things that you were not able even to determine what it was. There was a trash bag that I opened up because it felt odd, and maggots just poured out of the trash can. It looked like a puppet was inside of it because that animal was decomposed so bad in that bag.
Damn. St. Francis County's finest, people. Or
Absolutely.
should I say Washington County's finest?
Technically. So she was on the lam for a little while. She ended up taking a plea deal, which was very minor, in my opinion, compared to the offenses, because we ended up tabulating. Like, we're clearing out this apartment, dude. I flip over a sofa chair, and there's a snake, a boa constrictor, looking at me. But I thought it was alive. I freaked out, dude. It was a fat.
Man.
Dude, I would have tripped, yeah.
I was freaking out, dude. And I jumped back. I ran out. I go, ah! My maintenance guys were gone because they took a load to the dump, and I was in there by myself. And I look, and the thing was dead. It was petrified. But that was literally, again, back to Pazuzu. That was a real life depiction. So like, I read this stuff with Pazuzu, and I can put myself in the moment because, and seeing those videos and everything.
You're like, this girl's going to have bodies in the backyard real soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But I kind of feel like in our lifetime, we've been to like a party or went somewhere because there was nowhere else to go, to a really rough house that's like just trashed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been to those. I've been to a couple of those.
Yeah, and then you just get there and you're like screwed up and you're just like, okay, well,
right.
Party on.
Yeah, there was definitely a guy in a couple of those documentaries too that I guess partook in some of the activities that we'll get to later on.
Yeah.
He just he was like, I thought the dude was full of shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
he's like, yeah, there's a guy in the basement. If he happens to get out while you're sitting here, I got to run to the liquor store. He's like, I need you to get him and put him back in the basement. And he's like, yeah, sure, dude, no problem. If he runs out, I'll get him. He thought he was full of shit. They really had somebody in the basement.
Like, he was like straight up, he wasn't like, he was unabashedly doing a lot of things that he was doing. Pazuzu was.
Yeah.
Back to the animal sacrifice room in particular, like his mother, outside of just like law enforcement we mentioned earlier, knew about it. It was documented in some offenses when they came out to the house and stuff, but his mother allowed him to have this. Like, his mother is living in the house the whole time all of this shit's going on. Cynthia James is in this house.
Right.
And his mother was very concerned that he might commit suicide, so that's why she gave him a dark room to do his animal sacrifices. And he had to do an animal sacrifice once a month. And he felt like it empowered him, and it gave him more dominion and power over people. So she knowingly condoned his behavior. So again, back to what we were talking about earlier, like, she's really an accomplice in many respects in all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she like relinquished control of the house. You know, she backed herself into that one bedroom, which, mind you, it was not the cleanest bedroom in that, but it was,
hers was
it
by
was
far
cleaner.
the cleanest.
Right. It was the cleanest house or cleanest room in that house for
Yeah,
sure.
it wouldn't be hard to do.
Right.
The dirtiness of her apartment it kind of was like an apartment compared to the rest of the house, because it was just like, it was outdated and dusty. The issue with that, like, I'd take that any day of the week. Pazuzu, he became known for manipulating people as well into sex, and he would boast about allegedly killing sex workers to people as well. He said that he got a drug-like rush from still beating hearts of sacrificing animals as well. It is alleged, I never saw any reports too, so this gets kind of into the lore, that supposedly Pazuzu was a cannibal. Mm-hmm. Looking at the guy, based on everything else he did, I wouldn't be shocked.
Right.
No actual reports that he was.
Right.
I'm sure he talked like he was. He told people he was. Now, some people define cannibals as anybody that consumes anything from another person.
Human to human, right.
Yeah, right. So, by that definition, obviously, if he's like sucking on other people's blood and that
that's
sort of
cannibalism
stuff.
By definition, I guess.
I don't know about that aspect of it. Again, I can't, allegedly people have said that he was also a cannibal. There's no, actual confirmed reports of that. So,
I mean, he wasn't doing like the Dahmer thing where he was cutting people's calf muscles off and wrapping it up in a meat bag and having it for lunch.
Wait, would you really think that drinking somebody else's blood would make you a cannibal?
I mean, it could.
Yeah, I mean, if you're consuming, that's kind of a gray area.
I mean, by that thought, you slurp on somebody's semen, that makes you a cannibal too, for sure.
Oh, okay. Damn. My wife's definitely a cannibal.
I second that.
I'm not going to say anything.
Not your wife, my wife. I mean,
I wasn't
my wife,
talking
right,
about
right.
my wife because I'll be dead.
Oh, I'll definitely get hit if she hears this, but it's all good. It was worth it.
mine is loud and proud, so. So, speaking of wives, Pazuzu has been known to have several of his female followers be identified as quote-unquote fiancés. So, these were chicks he was banging, in his little mini cult that he had running.
Right.
He took more of a fond interest in certain amounts of them, and I think it was 3 or 4 of them in particular. And his ultimate girlfriend and accomplice was one of his fiancés.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into here in a little bit as well. So these were all known as his fiancés.
And to iterate, he also targeted younger women. A lot of these women were
Early 20s.
early 20s, late teens.
Fresh out of high school.
Right. Trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. You know what I mean? Probably drawn in by the parties and the I guess, power, if you want to say he has power. But
sure.
You know what I mean?
And I don't know much about, what is it, Salem, North Carolina.
Yeah.
So there may have not
Winston-Salem,
been much shit to
Cigarettes.
do there. Like,
There isn't.
Cigarettes.
Yeah,
That's the only
I
thing
mean-
I know about.
And they actually lived in a suburb of Winston-Salem, Carolina, so that's even more podunk than that.
Right.
Another thing, Ridge, you kind of mentioned this earlier as well with him, right after 9/11 happened too, he would wear turbans and profess to be a Muslim, and that would really excite people in the community too. So this guy was just all about doing things for shock factor, and all of this would eventually culminate and lead into Pazuzu and what he would ultimately be responsible for, and that's at least 2 murders that he was apprehended for. So let's start kind of a punch list of the charges and how those started. So Pazuzu's mother was actually his first victim in some respects. So in Clemens, which is the suburb that they lived in, his mother was actually approached from behind, and encircling around her neck, he used the strong of his arm, Pazuzu did. So essentially he was choking her.
His mother.
Yeah, his mother, the one who's allowed him to do all these things. On May 28th of 2010, Pazuzu was accused of putting his mother, Cynthia Lawson, in a chokehold at their home, which is at 2749 Nob Hill Drive in Clemens, North Carolina. In court documents, law enforcement officers allege that Algarad regularly performed satanic rituals and animal sacrifices. So this is in 2010. They had this on court documents.
Right.
They knew it.
They
as a
were
part
aware
these
of it.
procedures.
Right. They were definitely aware of him. What would you call it? The increase in violence with him. Don't let law enforcement fool you. They knew who this dude was for sure.
yeah, they just didn't want to mess with him.
Right.
And in October of 2010, Pazuzu had, who was then 31, was actually charged as an accessory of involuntary manslaughter. Now, the police had actually come to Pazuzu's house and questioned him about a missing persons case, and that's Joseph Emmrick Chandler. And at the time, he was literally misinforming police, throwing them off the trail of what actually took place with him. And so the charge was related to the shooting death of Joseph Emmrick Chandler, whose body was found in September of 2010 on a boat ramp in I think it's Dohana. Or Donaha. I missed the pronunciation of that
like
park.
Donaha.
In Yadkin County. Algarad was accused of misleading investigators and allowing a suspect in the shooting to stay at his home. Psychiatrists who interviewed Algarad said that he had schizophrenia, agoraphobia, and alcoholism, which we knew all that, but found him mentally competent to stand trial, so he didn't get the insanity plea. They also reported that he had intentionally filed down his teeth and had poor hygiene and body odor. And he admitted that he bathed no more than once a year and had not brushed his teeth in years.
Ooh, baby.
He felt such actions stripped his body of its natural defenses and warding off infections and illnesses. Now, this sounds a lot like this fucking QAnon bullshit going on today and anti-vaxxers and all this horse shit that's all tied in together. Does it not?
Oh, yeah.
Man, when we were caveman, we never used none of that detergent soap on our skin.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Lifespan of 29 years.
Right.
So September 22nd of 2011, Pazuzu Algarad's girlfriend Amber Bush was actually accused of slapping and attempting to choke Algarad's mother. So Birch later was convicted and sentenced to 12 months of probation. Just 2 months after the conviction, she was charged with assault and battery, with police alleging that she hit Algarad in the face. So she actually hit him as well. On October 5th of 2014, authorities arrested Algarad and his then 24-year-old girlfriend, Amber Birch. The handcuffs came out after officers reportedly discovered skeletal remains buried in the couple's backyard in Clemens, North Carolina. Deputies with the Forsyth Sheriff's Office said that the remains were those of Timothy Welch, who was 31.
No relation.
And Joshua Wetzler, 32.
Now, this is weird, boys. There's a Joshua Wetzler, and what was the other guy's
Tommy
name?
Welch.
Tommy Welch. So Joshua and then Welch. That's my name, boys.
It's like this was meant to be.
God damn, scary shit.
Only if a Casey was involved.
Dude.
They'd have the full trifecta.
Never know. I'll find a Casey. I'll make it relevant.
Casey Anthony, what? These two men had been missing since 2009. So
Jesus.
I don't know that reports ever came out on carbon dating or how long the skeletal remains had been there decomposing, but these guys were missing since 2009.
Yeah, I think one officer that was interviewed said that when they were digging up one of these guys' bodies, that it was just like a giant meat stack because they had dismembered him and just kind of put him in this one little tiny 3-foot wide hole.
I think it was Joshua specifically. They actually cut his dick off.
Yeah.
And they were like even allegedly playing with it and stuff in some reports and everything. Right. Yeah. Like they dismembered him entirely.
Good night.
Yeah.
What's kind of sad whenever you watch that Vice documentary that we've mentioned a couple times here is that I think it's Joshua's fiance that they do a little bit more of a character profile on him in this situation. He went missing and the police just wrote him off because the guy used to sell weed and shrooms and got busted for it.
Yeah.
So he was a nobody then, a criminal.
According to them, he was just some other fucking bum who was leaving his wife and kid behind, but that wasn't in his character.
Right.
And it seemed uncharacteristic of him to that point. We'll put it that way.
Right.
And the fact that he went missing seemed ultra odd to his wife. And he just thought that, he's on the lam and they're looking for him. And she just assumed the whole time that the police had been looking for him because his probation officer called and was like, hey, where's he at? She's like, I have no idea. And turns out...
She was concerned too.
Yeah,
she's like, well, I have no idea where he's at. I want to know where he's at.
Turns out the police were not ever actively looking for him.
Right.
They just did not give a shit.
Right.
So there's just so many incompetencies from law enforcement that's went on that's really just frustrating. But we find that to be a common theme with a lot of these serial killer stories.
Yeah. Look at Dahmer. Like I know I keep talking about him. Look at Gacy. Right. Look at Bundy.
Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
That's one of the most maddening ones that there ever is because how many times they had apprehended Bundy and gotten reports on Bundy, even from his fiancés and everything else, and never did anything with him.
That dude was wild. He escaped custody so many times.
Yeah. According to reports, Algarad allegedly shot Weltzler to death in July of 2009. Then Birch helped bury the body. The warrants further claim that Birch fatally shot Welch in October of 2009, and Algarad helped dispose of his body. So there's a murder charge on each, and there's an accessory charge on each. So they got basically the same charges for both people. Right. An alleged friend of the couple, Crystal Matlock, 28, was charged with accessory after the fact for first-degree murder. The warrants allege that she helped Birch bury Weltzler as well. After taking Algarad and Birch into custody, authorities released a video allegedly shot inside the couple's home. So this is the famous video that we keep talking about. And that, of course, prompted media reports, and they dubbed it the House of Horrors. So all you got to do is type in House of Horrors on Google. Now,
be careful how you spell horrors, too.
Yeah, it's that time of the year. Yeah, definitely.
Don't put a W in front of it.
Make sure the safe search is on, but I don't know. That might filter this one out, too. But yeah, and it is that time of the year. It's spooky season, so I'm sure there's a lot of, horror houses that are called that as well. But This is a very infamous North Carolina home that we've detailed here. So there's a 9.5-minute video clip, as we've talked about, that depicts the filth encased in there. There's garbage strewn about. It's uninhabitable. You hear the guys, as we mentioned, the city inspectors and people from the force saying that repeatedly throughout the video. The words that were written on the door were spray painted with "Evil will triumph" and satanic symbols and graffiti.
Like the one that it's like they said it was like 150 words on the wall, and it was literally like a whole thing that he wrote in marker about how when you read, every second that you read, it takes a second of your life away or something like that. There's like this whole story he wrote on marker on the wall. And it's just him rambling on about reading. So he's writing something for somebody to read, talking about how terrible reading is.
Absolutely.
Dude's a loon.
The guy clearly could have stood to do a little bit more reading in his life, of course.
Right.
In 2015, the 2749 Nob Hill Drive home was demolished after being declared unfit for human occupation. So I think that kind of went without saying.
Yeah.
On October 28th of 2015, prison guards reportedly discovered the self-proclaimed Satanist and accused murderer Pazuzu Algarad dead in his cell. Algarad was reportedly found bleeding from a deep wound on his arms. He had been scheduled to appear in court the next day. Pazuzu seemingly committed suicide in jail to escape the conviction of his crimes. He was believed to have used his sharpened teeth to bite into a vein in his arm. Although there was a glass vial inside of his prison cell with red liquid that was found, and an electric razor that's only worth commenting on because they were unpermitted items in his cell. Regardless of the tools used, it was clear that Pazuzu had bled to death. He was 36 when he died.
Dude, the dude's a schizophrenic psychopath, right? Obviously. But the balls it takes to fucking bite yourself bad enough to where you can bleed to death?
100%.
That's fucking brutal, man. You're talking about self-harm and mutilation.
I mean, I guess he had the tools to do it, too, with those filed-ass teeth with that Dremel tool.
Yeah, but psychologically, how did your brain allow you to do that to yourself? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, brutal.
Following his death, Pazuzu became the subject of the documentary that made him famous, The Devil You Know, which was aired on Vice. Now, it's important to note, too, and I definitely didn't want to leave the conversation without mentioning this today, that The Devil You Know does take more of an approach in talking to those affected by Pazuzu and his actions, the fallout with family, friends, townspeople, being connected to Pazuzu, the law enforcement, people that reported to the scene, people that were on his cases. Many of the victims and their families are covered in detail with a human interest aspect, and, and those approaches in the filmmaking, the documentary filmmaking, are being employed, so it's important to keep that in context.
What kills me in that whole documentary, though, is like these people that took part in this sick shit with him, they're like talking about it like it's so terrible and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you were fucking part of it.
There's the fucking guy that's shooting up heroin in the fucking documentary, too.
Yeah. I'm like, you're going to talk about this guy like he's some big giant piece of shit when you were fucking doing it with him.
Absolutely.
Jesus. And then using he threatened to kill me and I was scared of him. And his mother used that, which, anyway.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
The Devil You Know has become the subject of much scrutiny, though, in retrospect. A lot of the participants have come and spoken out. You can find them on many podcast appearances and things like that nowadays. And some of the claims are that Vice and the people making the film took artistic liberties in editing and framing certain situations, as well as misrepresenting the times and places and events.
But what media outlet fucking doesn't?
Yeah, that being said, I know this is going to sound bad, but to make any documentary interesting, you're gonna put a little spice on it.
Yeah,
right?
You can't be flat, right?
It's not like that you're outright sitting there, but there's details of the story. I could just say this as a podcast producer, what you hear on our audio feed is not everything that we talk about.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure.
You have to make things more interesting by eliminating some of the, the dead space and things
or stuff that's not relevant.
Right. Or stuff that's not relevant for the sake of the listener.
Right.
For the sake of the watcher in this case.
Right.
I think that's more so what happens with a lot of documentaries. Now, don't get me wrong, there's agendas with documentaries and you can get into political debates and discussions with that. We all know and have seen so many political documentaries in particular and divisive ones at that. Let's talk about Michael Moore. He's a huge political filmmaker. We can talk about the Zeitgeist films, Loose Change, things like that.
Yeah.
Things that have hit Outfoxed is another one that you can talk about. Things that have entered the political arena and are very divisive and divisive, and people with those opposing viewpoints speak out against them and their agendas, because obviously when you're making a movie that's against conservatives, you're probably left, progressive, somewhere in that ballpark.
Right, right.
It's important to keep in mind that, yes, there's always agendas behind the stuff. However, I don't know. Is there any excuses to make for this guy? What he did, what his followers did? I don't think so.
No, there's none at all.
There's no excuses.
And the guy is clearly a victim of himself, of mental illness. Nobody does these things.
And a system that doesn't know how to handle mental illness, and it puts people on the back burner so they don't have to deal with people's mental illness.
And not that the police need to be made an excuse for, the community needs to be made an excuse for, the doctors that threw pills at people, but it was important for us to lay that groundwork in that context of the area, the things that went on in the area, the fact that this is right in the middle of the opioid epidemic, and what police are dealing with on a daily basis is people, taking 50 Percocet a day or whatever the case is, or Vicodin or so on and so forth, or on Dan Somas, or fucking freebasing fentanyl off of foils and shit like that.
Morphine patches and bullshit like that.
So, the police are not, I can tell you from this area, personal experience, the police are not equipped for these situations and haven't been. And they're just starting to now get some of the facilities and resources and tools
Like
to actually,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
And training to do so. It's one thing to have the tool, but to know how to use it as well.
Right.
Even paramedics were so behind the 8 ball on a lot of drugs that were hitting the markets in the streets. And I'm sure that these guys were overwhelmed, but you know, when you have reports of somebody committing animal sacrifices,
you want to go around back and look and see.
Yeah.
See what's going on.
Yeah. If I was a investigator, I would for sure be like, we need to look at this.
Or even just the door opening.
Right.
whenever the police actually came to question Pazuzu about the person that he misled them with, where they found the body there at near the boat ramp, they didn't even check his house. They just came to the door, talked to him. They didn't check his house. They didn't ask for entry of his house. They didn't ask for
Well, they didn't
checking
want to
his
fuck with it
property.
because they knew they're going to find something.
Probably paperwork. Sort of
Yeah,
shit.
dude. And I'm telling you, man, I worked with officers in a different situation at the prison. You know, Rich knows too. And I know of all kinds of situations where, like, I just don't want to fuck with that. I don't want to do the paperwork on that. You know, I'm going to act like that never happened. I never seen that and just go on about my business. So I'm sure it was definitely a similar situation.
So Pazuzu was a guy, this situation, I wanted to go with a little bit more of an obscure pick rather than the ones that have been covered to death. Jonestown, obviously a pretty popular thing, our first submission in the series. Then we tackled Sharikyo, and then we tackled Gacy. Sharikyo, a little bit more obscure, more of a popular in the time that it took place. I would say that, you know, obviously Gacy's pretty famous, probably top 3 or 5 most identified serial killer.
Right.
Definitely North American serial killer for sure.
But Pazuzu's not a guy that's talked about too much, and there is a lot of speculation that he killed other people and was involved in deaths with other people, especially the fact that he bragged about
Didn't Amber claim
killing
that
people.
he killed up to like 15, but they only knew about 2?
Yeah. And even some of the killings that he has been accused of and was going to, you know, be tried for, or even in some of these follow-up documentaries,
Right.
or even being questioned. Like, there's actually a movement of who would want to, it's beyond me. There's actually a movement of people trying to claim innocence for him as well.
Yeah.
And that it was just like poor police work that was trying to blame him for everything, make him the scapegoat.
Well, I remember when the Church of Satan like completely separated themselves from him.
See, that's the thing, too, that we have to definitely address before we get off this, too, is the fact that he is not a Satanist.
No, he's evil.
A Satanist teachings, if you know anything about Satanism, is not this.
Yes.
He is a characterization of what evangelicals think
Satanism is about. Absolutely.
He's like a movie.
He embodied what they think is evil.
He's just a habitual regurgitator of bullshit. Quite
Exactly.
frankly. That's all that he is. He's just a counteractive, like anything that he does is just in retaliation. He's just a contrarian, really.
Yeah.
You know, it was what the community was reflecting. He was just the mere opposite of that. A guy who didn't really have a father figure in his life for the majority of his life. He had all these mental health issues, was an addict could be from all the way back to age 13. You know, that's when he started using. I mean, Jesus, where does it stop with this guy?
Yeah.
For real. And then to have the cult following, the followers that he had, probably aided and abated his God complex that he had as well.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, there's no question that the guy obviously is at least a fascinating, you know, topic of conversation. Probably better off dead. I think it's safe to say that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It probably is going to save a lot of people a lot more trauma. You know, victims, families, stuff like that would have to endure all the trials and the sentencing. And it's probably just better off that he's gone.
And another thing that we're not addressing is the fact that who knows even really what the long-lasting fallout's going to be from this. All the lives that he affected.
Right.
The trauma that people
many
endured
people
in his
are
company.
involved?
I mean, just some of the situations that we depicted in light, just kind of bullet point fashion. Just imagine being there, a party goer, seeing some of the things that took place. There was kind of like these alleged lourish snuff and sex films too that he would show occasionally to people.
Yeah. One girl said, it was a young girl, I think she was like 19, and him and Amber had brought her over to the house. And when she had got there, she said she immediately felt uncomfortable. She didn't want to go inside or anything. But then they kind of insisted that she come inside and watch a film. And she was like, okay, I'll go inside. I'll watch this movie with them and then I'll leave. You know, well, they take her inside and it's a homemade smut film. And they're like naked and dancing with knives and doing crazy stuff on this mattress. Well, then all of a sudden Pazuzu takes out this bloody handkerchief. and like wraps it around his head, and the blood's like pouring off of it and stuff, and he's like making love to this girl at the same time. Come to find out, it was one of the 2 murder victims' headbands.
Josh's.
Yeah, that was identified by his family that he wore all the time. Wild stuff. So, some despicable sex videos.
Absolutely. I'd like to watch them personally.
I mean,
Yeah,
you could probably find them.
I'd watch it.
You could probably find them, to be honest with you.
So, guys, this concludes episode 40. Think we guys did this justice? Anything we missed?
Yeah, no, I think, like you said, it was really tough, actually, to find a lot of information on this because a lot of accounts are either small journalists from the area or like Vice. Vice was the big first like major corporation to really tackle it as a documentary. Yeah. So there's a lot of personal accounts and private opinion, but there's not a lot of factual information out there on this subject. So yeah, given with what we could find, I absolutely think we covered it as best we could.
So this episode, of course, concludes our month-long themed of Halloween programming. We really churned it out this month, guys. We produced 6 original episodes just this month alone, plus the things that we did for Waxing On and Knobnard's Closet. So I think we did Halloween some justice this year.
Have we talked about Grandel since
I guess we haven't. So yeah, all 3 of us, we went to Grandel Wrestling. That'd be a good way to kind of wrap things up too.
Yeah.
Definitely was a good time. ATI Podcast was promoted.
You boys know I had a good time.
Yeah.
I was fucking way drunk.
The opening match was killer.
Dude, that ending match was fucking crazy too, man.
Yeah. They had a Texas death match at the end.
Yeah. That was brutal.
That was brutal for sure.
It was awesome though. So congrats, Joey. That was awesome, man. Thanks for inviting us and thanks for being a guest. We had a great time. Well, I had a great time. I'm sure these boys had a great time too. But yeah, Clownvis was great. Very nice. Very humble guy. All the wrestlers were cool. Yep. I mean, everybody was cool.
My only complaint is it didn't last long enough. It went too quick.
I know.
It did go quick. Yeah.
I know.
Especially after that intermission, man, it just flew by.
Yeah,
time flies when you're having fun.
And you know what? I was thoroughly impressed with Pops with that setup. Like because even Ridge was talking before we went. He's like, I'm just trying to imagine a wrestling ring inside of Pops, and they pulled it off, dude. It was nice. It was a good setup. I loved it.
Yeah, very good setup. We were fortunate enough to get good balcony seats for the sponsors, and they, of course, us as a sponsor, we sponsored the Dak Draper and the Deliver Moses match. So Dak Draper is seen routinely on NWA TV. He was a part of the Ring of Honor as well. Actually, formerly in WWE Developmental, recruited by Jerry Briscoe back in the day. And if you remember Vince McMahon's Stooges, Patterson and Briscoe, so he's the one who recruited him in WWE. Okay. And Jerry Briscoe and his brother were actually like shoot wrestlers from Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. Very good wrestlers. Like they could hook the shit out of you in real life. But they did professional wrestling to make some money back in the day, and just were in the business for years. Jerry still mentors and trains people. Shit, has his own podcast. Very entertaining guy.
Yeah, the talent, man, I was impressed. Everybody put on a hell of a show. Even I mean, like Clownvis, he even got in on a match. I think, which was awesome.
Got a little interaction. The thing that comes with indie shows, and we kind of talked a little bit about this with Joey too. There's an inherent level of phonyism that just starts to creep in sometimes, but this was very professionally done. Oh yeah, like very tastefully done. All the work was pretty sharp. The refs were good.
The refs were great.
That's another thing I have to commend is the refs were fantastic, and refs don't get enough acknowledgement often in these situations. The refs were just fantastic, and they were there. They were present. They were enforcing the rules. You don't see that in professional wrestling anymore. They're just kind of like an old painting on the wall in many cases. They were actually acting like referees.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like they're yelling at the wrestler, trying to get him back in the ring. You know what I mean? Stuff. Just felt. It was good. It was good. They did a good job.
We were sitting waiting the whole time to I think they're going to announce the podcast out and stuff. And the first half of the matches, I guess, didn't have sponsors. Yeah. So we weren't really hearing that. And then all of a sudden we heard somebody's name. I was like, wait a minute, they aren't announcing them. And I was like, well, our match hasn't happened yet. They started talking about ATI Podcast. We're all standing there together in the balcony and we're looking at each other like, hey, that's us.
We missed it. Yeah.
We were too overwhelmed with we were actually being talked about over a PA at a St. Louis event. Mm-hmm. And we're just like, oh shit, we should be recording this. Yeah. And I got the last 3 seconds of the ring announcer.
And that guy did so fucking good.
Oh, he was fantastic.
He's like, the ATI Podcast on Inc. Oh, he was so good. What's that guy's name? He does their podcast too.
He does do their podcast. I can't recall his name. Very professional
he was
guy.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They also had ATI Podcast imagery all over. They had LED panels throughout the bar area, as well as they had a side stage set up that was prominently displayed where they had like a DJ booth set up, but that DJ booth was lit up to look like a mini wrestling ring.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, so we put some pictures up on our social media. We were able to meet Clownvis. You know what I noticed after the fact? I was kind of getting tired, and I had to drive us back and stuff, and I was trying to power my way through shit. I noticed after we got back and I put up pictures that Dak Draper, the guy we've sponsored, was standing right behind us whenever we took a picture with Clownvis.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yeah,
dude.
and we could have taken a picture with
That's
Dak
awesome.
Draper, and I was just like, shit.
I missed Moses too. I meant to get a little quick chat with Moses, but everybody was
The guy that was in the opening match, the African American guy, that was really good.
Yeah.
I did talk to him at the bar.
Oh yeah.
Whenever I was down there, and I was like, "Hey man, you guys had a fantastic opening match."
You were gonna buy him a beer, and then
I was
somebody
gonna
else
buy him
did.
a beer, and the guy in front of me was like, "Hey, what are you drinking?" I was like, "God damn it,
Man.
You motherfucker!
So he had already gotten him a beer, but Moses was running around with that guy, I noticed. But they kept going outside back in. So, we missed Moses every time. But I have since commented on Moses, shared some stuff from post the match.
I seen he'd been interacting a little bit, so
And I said, I was proud to have sponsored your guys' match. And he said, thank you so much.
so that's awesome. Thanks, Moses.
And Moses has got some matches coming up here in the future. And actually, a future guest of the ATI podcast, Benjamin Trust, is also a professional wrestler who's got a really good look. And he kind of looks like, if you watch the current product, I think he has a Will Ospreay look about him. But he's got a unique gimmick. He comes out to the ring in a bomber jacket that's got a pinup girl on the back, and it's modeled after his wife.
Oh.
But his wife has got a little bit of a classy pinup girl look about her.
Oh, that's cool.
And he actually incorporates it into his ring gear and stuff.
Attaboy.
So he's a real cool guy.
Yeah, I'm
he
excited
seems
for
like,
that.
I obviously haven't talked to him other than DMs, but he's going to be on the podcast here eventually. I reached out to him. Coincidentally, he was a tag partner with Moses here on an event this weekend.
Yeah, I was going to say they just had another one, didn't they?
Yeah, we got a couple of pro wrestlers in the chain here. A lady who did the artwork for Grandel Wrestling that we talked about with Joey, Maxine. She's going to be a future guest as well.
Freaking
Her prints were
incredible.
Yeah, fantastic
Yes.
artwork. So we're going to try and reincorporate some of those folks and artists that were involved in that event too here on the show. I think Maxine also, as Joey detailed on the show, on his episode, was actually commissioned to do artwork on Four Hands cans. She did the pinup line for Four Hands. So if you ever had those cans.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're really, it's good.
That's cool.
It's really good.
That's cool.
And she's been retweeted by a lot of famous people, more particularly pro wrestlers, because she's a fan of pro wrestling. She's done a
She'll
lot
be
of portraits
famous.
and-
She'll be famous.
Yeah,
Eventually.
she's a fantastic
Yeah,
artist.
she is incredible. She does really great work.
So we look forward, and you'll see her on our schedule postings that we do every couple months as well, but she'll be coming up before Christmas. Got some exciting year-end programming in the works as well, so be sure to keep an eye out, guys, as Ridge mentioned at the open of the show, for future episodes of Waxing On dropping. Ridge and Jake are taking that over, and they're going to have some exciting new episodes in the works for us.
All right, we got some good ones. I've got some good material in this week.
I've actually, since I've fallen off music so much, I'm so thankful for you boys doing this, because then I can just be like, I'm going to go check that out.
Next episode, I'm really excited about this. Next week is episode 41, and we're doing the ATI Podcast election special.
For president, baby.
We ATI Podcast for president. Now, obviously, this isn't a presidential election, but let's just pretend that it is.
I mean, it's a pretty fucking important election, and if you're
Absolutely.
not voting in it, you're a fucking piece.
Yeah.
And if you're in Missouri, vote yes on Prop 3. I can't. If you're going to come out and vote for anything, please vote for that.
Yeah.
That will just do so much for this state outside of, making marijuana, cannabis, weed recreational
And accessible.
and expunge records of people.
Right.
That's going to bring so much more revenue into the state, tax revenue specifically, to improve schools, infrastructure.
I'm down.
Things that we need in
You know
the
I'm
state.
down.
Missouri is one of the most worst funded per capita, senior health and human services. These type of things can improve just overnight almost with an action like this. Just that simple.
Yep.
And so just to get back into the kind of what the idea of with next week, of course, we're going to talk about things and issues as if we were running for president, what our political stances are. Some of it's going to be serious. Some of it's going to be a little extreme. We're going to dabble in some satire and some
We're going to
fun.
do the ballot. You want to go through the ballot measures?
I
or
don't
like
want
the
to
big
do
ones?
that, actually.
No, you don't want to do that?
No, we're going to talk about some of that, yes. However, what we're going to do is we're going to do it as if we're running for president. So we're going to tackle those heavy-hitting discussion topics.
Wow. I'm down with that, too.
So we're really going to swing for the fences with this one. Nice. And we're hoping to have some fun little political ads, too.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of fun with this episode, I think.
Oh, dude, I've got ideas already.
Let's make them happen. Let's make them happen.
I got a couple prior guests that I think I need to get a hold of for this.
Let's do it, my man. So for this week, I am Barrett. You can find me at Barry Insane on Instagram and Twitter. We got Ridge. Follow Waxing on RJ on Instagram. And he's Josh. Josh is on Instagram _Joshua Welch. For this week, we're out of time. Good night and good luck.
And happy Halloween, guys. Stay safe.
And stay off the fentanyl candies if you can.
Wear a condom.
Yep.
Hey, this is Josh from ATI Podcast. For show updates and news about the podcast, follow us on social media. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ATI Podcast 22, on Twitter at podcast_ATI, on Instagram at the ATI Podcast, on TikTok at ATI Podcast. DMs are always welcome. Have a question for the show? You can always email us at atipodcastquestions@gmail.com. Stay safe out there.
This is Barrett from the ATI Podcast. Each week, Josh and I discuss current events, pop culture, music, TV, movies, politics, sports. Nothing is out of bounds. You can also tune in to learn about rising artists, small businesses. Whether it's music, graphic design, filmmaking, or even a brick-and-mortar mom-and-pop shop, we will be spotlighting folks and their endeavors. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Anchor, or anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. Just search ATI Podcast. We would like to thank you for your continued support, and as always, please stay safe out there.